I think if you're looking to sell a business, I would say don't assume that you don't have a buyer. Just because,
Mm.
especially in rural America, just because you don't have someone in mind locally who you think would be interested, list the business anyway. Go to your CPA who did your tax return last year, ask them to help you put a value on your business, and just get it listed and out there and see what happens. I think if Doug Brandt had done that, he would have had more interest than he realized. It's definitely an ongoing conversation between my husband and I, and every year we have our CPA provide a value on our business where it stands. Just because if someone approached us, everything is always for sale, right? Like this business
Yeah.
is near and dear to
Yeah.
our hearts, but we have grown it to a point where we have to decide, okay, is one of us going to eventually do this full time? Or do we need to find someone else who can really take it to the next level? So
Mm.
that's an ongoing conversation we have. The
Hmm.
business is obviously near and dear to us, but we also want to do right by it and the
Hmm.
whole legacy.
Welcome to the How to Buy or Sell a Business Successfully podcast. The concepts discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is intended or formed by this podcast. No legal advice is intended in the substance of this podcast. Feel free to check out our website, www.goforemanlaw.com. Enjoy the show and welcome your hosts, Jake Wayman and Sam Foreman.
Well, welcome back to How to Buy and Sell a Business Successfully podcast. My name is Jake Wayman. My wife and I are the proud owners of the Orange Theory Fitness franchises here in Wichita. Also serve as a fractional business development executive for an investment bank out of Oklahoma City called Infinity Capital Partners, and also help out my dad and brother's company, Citywide Facility Solutions. Best thing going on in my life right now is actually my wife and I are getting ready to celebrate our 6th anniversary, and we actually got to go to Vegas and we got to see the Backstreet Boys at the Sphere, and it was phenomenal. But what I also learned is that we are older now because all my employees at Orange Theory are all Z generation and they have no idea who Backstreet Boys is, and that hurts my heart.
Do you look at the
So
way that you would look at your parents if they're like, yeah, I was at a Carpenter's concert. It's like,
it was, yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, like, there was a Backstreet Boys song on here. I'm like, do you know who sings this? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, do you know who NSYNC is? They said Justin Timberlake. I was like, that's a piece of NSYNC. Anyway,
yeah.
though, it just makes me feel old, but that was a blast. Highly recommend going to the Sphere for anything. That is an awesome environment. But I'm joined with my amazing co-host, Sam Foreman.
Hey, I'm Sam Foreman, founder of Foreman Law. One of the best things going on in my life right now is watching my kids grow up, and that's super fun. It's also a little bit terrifying. We have lots of very thoughtful child-proofing things around our house that I will now take credit for all of my wife's diligence and work on that. Thank you, Meg. Love you. But our kids, they're basically pointless at this point. Our kids will like come out and we'll have like the lock on the pantry and it's up high, and I'll come out in the morning and the pantry door is open, and clearly the children have gone in there and just harvested all of the snacks and everything out. And there's a chair there, and like they figured out how to like climb up on the tall chair and then climb up and reach up and take the child lock off. And so that's fun. That's fun. It's also terrifying. But today we're grateful to be joined by an amazing guest, Ashley Comeau. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about your journey. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. So my husband Adam and I actually own Brandt's Market in Lucas, Kansas, and a second location in Plainville, Kansas. It is not our full-time day job. My husband is a paramedic with Ellis County EMS, and I am an attorney at Jeter Law Firm in Hayes. We live just north of Hayes and Ellis County in Plainville, Kansas, so about 30-minute drive for both of us. We have two kids. We have a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old, which, it's pretty easy when you say, tell us the best thing going on in your life right now.
Uh-huh.
When you have small kids, it's just, I mean, they're everything. So we just came back from a week in Kansas City. We took the 7-year-old with us to a work conference, and it's just a fun age, where he is really getting to kind of tag along and enjoy doing some bigger kid things with us. So
Oh, that's
I got
cool.
to take him to some of my favorite spots. I used to live in Kansas City, spent some time there working at a law firm on the plaza. So one of my favorite parts about where I worked on the plaza was we were right behind Winstead's,
Oh yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that original location. And
Yeah.
so when we left the Kansas City Zoo, we kind of took a detour back to downtown through the plaza, and I introduced him to the butterscotch milkshake
Oh yeah.
during happy hour
Oh,
on
that's so
on the
Yeah.
cool.
plaza. So
Yeah. I
that
love it.
was
Yeah.
just one of the highlights of our trip. And every day he asked me if we could go back, which just made my heart so
Yeah.
happy.
That's cool.
Yeah, I lived in KC for about 7 years, and it's like I lived in Prairie Village, and so I always like there was all those things that you want to go back to. They're just nostalgic from like your first stuff, like right out of
Hmm.
college that you get to go
Yes.
experience and stuff. So yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, actually, tell us a little bit about, kind of your journey into becoming a business owner, because, you and I met in law school, and then, you were in Kansas City and had that, had an amazing career opportunity there, and then, what was that process like to just sort of see, okay, hey, here's this other opportunity to go become a business owner?
Sure. So I was at a great law firm. I was at Wagstaff and Cartmel.
Hmm.
Loved my job, loved the people I worked with, had no intentions of leaving, and I met my husband while I was living in Kansas City. He was already back home in Plainville working for his dad at that time. And after dating long distance about 3 years, we decided, hey, one of us needs to really make a move. We're engaged now, and we
Yeah.
can't continue like this. So we did a lot of back and forth and kind of weighed the pros and cons. And ultimately, both of our families are out here in Rooks County. So it made more sense for us to move back here. His dad gave me my first job when I moved back. I was in-house counsel for his companies, and eventually I made my way up to Hayes to Jeter Law Firm. So that was what precipitated the move from Kansas City. And then somewhere along the way, I moved back in 2015, and we purchased our business in 2018. So it just sort of happened. It definitely was not planned, and the business was definitely not the reason that I initially made the move back.
Yeah.
Well, and talk a little bit about the identifying the business, because we talk a lot about ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, which both your husband went through that. How where did Brandt's Market, how did that come about? I mean, you're in Hayes, Kansas, small town USA, or Hayes America, as a lot of people like to call it. And
He's
but
America.
like talk through that. I mean, it's like I also had purchased my business with my wife, but like how you came about the opportunity.
Sure, sure. So pausing on your question for a second, Hayes America, the just so most people don't know why that is. Why do we call it Hayes America? There was a commercial in like the 90s that was on, I swear, every 5 minutes. If you were a kid watching anything on TV, I think it was for a car dealership, and he was like, "Come on down to Hayes America." I mean, great marketing.
Yeah, for sure. I
That's
mean, it's
awesome.
it.
Branded the whole town, not just
Yeah.
his business. So
I love
anyway,
it.
that's where that
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
from. So we actually we had both grown up going to Brandt's Meat Market. It's in this little town, Lucas, Kansas, the grassroots art capital of Kansas. It's right by Wilson Lake. So we both grew
Hmm.
up going there, on the way to the lake, on our way to Salina. And it's just kind of, it's such an old business. This business was originally established in 1922.
Wow.
So if you grew up anywhere in the region, you've either been there, you've heard of it, you know of it, you've had their product. And
Hmm.
so they suddenly announced in January of 2018 that they were done, they were closing. Um,
Mm.
they sold out of all of their product in less than 24 hours. They had initially announced we'll be closing at the end of this week, and they ended up having to close by 5 p.m. that day.
Oh, wow.
So that story was picked up by a lot of the local media. It was all over social media. And between my husband and myself, and then our immediate family, especially my father-in-law, who is an entrepreneur, we were all wondering, why is this business closing? Why aren't they continuing it? Why aren't they trying to sell it? And so my husband and my father-in-law just picked up the phone and called Doug Brandt and said, "Hey, we'd just like to ask you a few questions. Can we come meet with you?" And so that was how it really got started, was just there was this sort of big public outcry for how can this
Hmm.
business close?
Right.
Um, it can't possibly
Right.
be unsuccessful. It's been here for 96 years. So we started and initiated that conversation.
Okay.
No, that's cool. And just to give our listeners a little bit broader idea of the area who might not be familiar with the geography. So, Rooks County, that is how far from like Kansas City and how far from Wichita, for example, and
So Wichita's closer. We're
uh-huh.
about a little over 3 hours from
Okay.
Wichita. Hayes is really right in the middle
Hmm.
between Denver and Kansas City. It's about four
Yep.
and a half hours either way.
Right there on I-70, and then how big
Right.
is so Brant's is in Lucas. How big is Lucas, Kansas for
It is
folks that
not
haven't
big.
been there?
How small is Lucas, Kansas? Lucas has a population of between 400 and 500 people, I
Okay.
believe.
Okay.
So it is a small community,
Sure.
smaller than
Yeah.
Hayes is about, I want to say like 25,000. Plainville, where my husband and I live, just
Hmm.
north of Hayes, is about 1,800 people.
Hmm.
So Lucas is exceptionally small. I grew up in a really small town in Rooks County of about 95 people, went to a school in a town of about 400 people. So I'm really familiar with towns that size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Lucas is really, it's in Russell County. So if you've ever driven down I-70 and seen the exit for Russell, it's not far.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's great. And so, so you've got a small town here. You've got this, gem of a business that's been around for 96 years,
Mhm.
and it's getting ready to close. And that there's this kind of public sort of response to that.
Mhm.
Um, how does that sort of a thing, how does that even happen in the first place, where a business gets to that point where it's been around creating all this value, enough to sustain itself and keep going for I mean however many generations that must have been in that family, to then get to a place where it's like, hey, we're just done and we're closing,
Right.
and
It
how
was a
does it even
mystery
get to
to
that point?
us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So It was in it was owned by three generations of the Brandt family.
Hmm.
Doug was the third generation to own it. His daughter Stephanie was the fourth generation to work in it. And before that, so the business owned as Brandt's Market was actually 96 years old, but they had purchased it from Harrison and Sons. So the building and the business itself is much older.
Hmm.
Mm.
So it was a meat market even before Brandt's owned it. And
Wow.
um, I think it was just it's like any other rural town or even big city. We used to have all of these things that you go into Walmart and you see all the different departments.
Hmm.
Those all used to be separate small businesses in town, right?
Right.
So you had the butcher, you had the grocer, you had the clothing store. All of those things were separate businesses. And this just happened to be one of those businesses that was that single department, the meat market, that hung on for 100 years.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that part of that success was because A, it was kept in the family for as long as it was. There was always another generation who kind of took it over. Doug had gone to K-State. His kids went to K-State and they had that agricultural background. They obviously had the background of growing up in the business and they just were entrenched in it and they knew it. And unfortunately, it got to a point where their children had gotten degrees and gone on to other careers. Stephanie did come back and help her dad for it was about no, it was about 4 years. By the time that they closed, she had come back to help her dad and make sure it kept going. But it just reached a point in their family where there wasn't someone who was ready at that point in time and willing to
Hmm.
take it on.
Yeah.
So for them, and I think this happens to a lot of businesses where you get to a point where the owner is ready to retire, they
Hmm.
just assume there's not a buyer. How,
Yeah.
and it wasn't a business that was ever listed for sale. It passed from generation to generation. So I don't think that that really crossed their minds.
Yeah.
One of the things Doug Brandt did tell us was there were a number of people who reached out and asked to buy their recipes, their family recipes.
Mm.
And that's really what this business is known
Right.
for is James Brandt, the original owner in 1922. He had immigrated here from Czechoslovakia, and he brought with him recipes from what he had learned back in Czechoslovakia. And that's what they are known for is their ring bologna, their ithernitzi, their smoked sausages, all of these things that were original recipes. That is what people called and said, "Hey, we want to buy your recipes." But
Mhm.
we were the only ones to call and say, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you about buying your business."
Mm.
And so that stood out to them, and that's why the conversation continued.
No, that's cool. What kind of impact do you think it would have had on the community if just the business had shut and just had
You
gone
know,
away?
we've thought about that a lot. It would have made an impact.
Mhm.
I don't think it would have been anywhere close to the end all be all for Lucas, Kansas.
Sure.
They have this great grassroots art
Garden of
system
Eden.
all throughout town. So
Yeah.
if you've never been to
Yep.
Lucas, you should absolutely take the time to come off I-70. It's just a 15-minute drive. I mean, you get to take a scenic route around Wilson Lake. Um, Go to the Garden of Eden, which I'm sure many people have heard of the Garden of Eden. Take the time to do the tour and understand what it is and why it's as crazy and unique and cool as it is. There's the Grassroots Art Center, which is also fabulous. It's this great little art museum right there in downtown Lucas. And then all over town, there are just fun, creative, bizarre art displays. And there are unique, different little individual museums and things you can go to as well. So Lucas has quite a bit of tourist traffic. And it's really interesting because now we use Square. When we bought the business, Doug Brandt was still using this really old cash register from like the 1930s where they were
No,
punching
that's
in
awesome.
Yeah.
numbers
Did you
and
keep
printing
that?
out a paper ticket.
Yeah. Do you still have the cash register with the?
No, the family
Oh
wanted to
man.
keep that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they did, and we were like, "Hey, we
Nice.
are fine with you taking that. We're
Yeah.
going to upgrade to digital." But it's really interesting because Square tracks that for us. If somebody is a
Yeah.
first-time buyer or if they are a returning customer, and in Lucas, over every year, I mean, we've owned this business now for 7 years. Every year in Lucas, more than 50% of our business is first-time customers.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so we actually rely heavily on that tourism. I don't think that Lucas necessarily depends on our business, but that
Mhm.
said, we are one of the only places in probably within a 40-minute drive where you can really go buy
Mhm.
food.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so being able to provide that fresh, not just any food, but fresh meat
Yeah.
and these traditional recipes, that's a big deal
Yeah.
to a small community and the surrounding area
Right.
for sure.
Well, talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about the innovations, because you bought a generational company, been in generations for years, and you brand new, have never worked in, the meat industry that I know of prior to doing this. So, what innovations out even outside of the digital that you did to help? You're 7 years into this. It sounds like you've grown it. You've added another location. What other things have you done to be able to innovate a legacy business that is wrapped around food?
Sure. So one of the biggest challenges that we faced when we took over was that because it was a generational business, because they had kind of done things the way they had always done them, which there was nothing wrong with that, but it was almost painfully inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, one of the first things that we did was beyond learning how they do it, which is really important. When you buy a business, don't just come in and from day one say, we're going to change everything. You've got to learn how they do it before you make sure that the way you want to do it is going to work. So we upgraded a lot of equipment. So Brandt's had actually been named one of the 8 wonders of Kansas commerce
Huh.
by the Kansas Sampler Foundation. Marcy
Yeah.
Penner had and her group had named it one of the 8 wonders of Kansas commerce. But one of the reasons they were named that is because they still did everything in a really old-fashioned way. And we've tried to maintain the parts of that we feel are really key. So, for example, the original products like the ring bologna, the pepper sausage, the smoked sausage, those products we still smoke in the 100-year-old brick smoker in the back.
Mm.
So, we want to make sure we maintain that same flavor profile because that's really important. But we use a more modern mixer. We use a modern stuffer. The one Doug was using was powered by water, and we now use one that is actually powered by electricity. So, I mean, different things like that. We upgraded a lot of the equipment in the beginning of the process, and we put out a lot more product a lot more product week to week than they did. For one, because we added the second location, but also because we added the online website.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now basically powering 3 stores to their 1 store, and we had to be more efficient in order
Yeah.
to make that happen, right? So a lot of the equipment had to be upgraded. The state also, the Department of Agriculture, where we get our inspection level, was very involved from day one. They had over time kind of allowed Doug certain exemptions and different things to continue his business on. But they reached a point where they said, hey, we really need you to make some major changes, which also played into why he was ready to close the business
Mm.
at, his age, which I believe was early 70s. I think he was 72 when we bought the business. He was not willing to make big changes and change how he was doing things in order to appease the state. He said,
Mhm.
I'd rather just retire.
Yeah.
And I can't blame him. This was how his grandpa did it. This is how his dad did it and how he did it. So
Yeah.
I don't blame him or fault him at all. But we involved the state from day one and said, okay, tell us what you need to see in order for us not to have any issues. Um, and so we incorporated a lot of those changes from the get-go as well. And so there were a lot of things that we did have to change in order to appease our state inspection level, make sure we could supply 3 stores, and then also to start working toward, we're about probably 75% of the way through getting our federal inspection level so that we can wholesale our products to other businesses and to
Okay.
restaurants. Right now, we can only wholesale like a limited amount of fresh product. But if we want to be able to wholesale our products that we're known for, the ring bologna, our beef
Hmm.
sticks, our sausages, anything that's cured and smoked, we've got to get that federal inspection level. So all of those things, the kitchen, especially being able to house all of the new equipment, being able to make sure that the kitchen is up to par for a federal inspection level, that was the main reason we actually added the second location in Plainville. We needed a bigger space. We needed a more modern space than what our little late 1800s building could provide in
Hmm.
Lucas. So the Plainville location was added mostly for the kitchen, also for convenience for us, since that is not our full-time jobs. We needed to have it closer. My husband goes in and from the beginning, he made all the product. We were able to hire a production manager for about 3 years that took a lot of the weight off of us for that 3-year period when our son was young and our daughter was first born and we just had a lot going on. We were able to get someone. He has since left and moved on, and so my husband's back to making everything again. So having that Plainville location has been really key. The other reason the Plainville location is so key, in Lucas, it's a little more remote, and because it's so removed, UPS and FedEx will deliver to the Lucas location, but in order to have the website and be able to ship, especially at the holidays when we're shipping out, 100 boxes or more a day, UPS and FedEx would not allow for pickup at our Lucas location. So at that time, we had to load everything up and take it to either the US Postal Service, which frankly does not provide an efficient enough service anymore to ship meat, or we would have had to load it up and drive it back to Plainville or somewhere Hayes where there's a closer UPS or FedEx drop-off
Hmm.
location. And so for us, that just didn't make sense. And in Plainville, UPS literally shows up, they bring in their dolly, they go right to our walk-in cooler, load it up, and take it out to the truck for us. So
No, that's
that was
awesome.
another efficiency
Yeah.
that just there was no way to make it work in Lucas. So that was the other reason we added that second location. So there were a lot of things that had to change
Yeah.
and had to change really rapidly for us to grow the business the way we wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit. I mean, it's clear that you all have, kind of found something that's very meaningful to you, that's meaningful at a community level. It sounds like that's been a lot of work too. To kind of business is hard. Uh, Tell us a little bit about like why was that important to you? To because I assume when you got into the deal process, you went in eyes wide open about like, hey, this is going to be a lot of work. We're going to have a lot of things to do. Why was it, why did it make sense to do that? Why was it important to you all to go through all this in the first place?
Well, first of all, I don't think we knew how much work it would be. You should
No one ever
absolutely,
does.
you
No one
should go
ever
into
does.
these things blindly like we did. Um, we knew it would be a lot of work.
Yeah.
But you know what's really interesting is when we studied the history of the business and the family shared some documents with us, we learned that back in the 1920s, James Brant would wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning,
Mm.
drive like a horse and wagon over to Russell, get ice, bring it back to the store to put in the cooler. Then he would go out in the field, butcher a cow, bring that in, and then start breaking it down for the day. I mean,
Holy cow.
what we consider busy for ourselves
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
nothing compared to
Yeah.
what life was like back in the
Yeah.
1920s, right? So, with that said, I would say, you know, it is a lot of work. And I think the reason it was so important to us was just because this is something that represents history. It's there's a lot of history in rural America, and I think it's easier to find it, right? Because it's been
Mm.
preserved either by families over time or the locals have just supported it because they don't want to see it go away. And that
Mhm.
was how we felt that, preserving history and showing not only the locals, but people from outside of our community something as unique as this historic Czech meat market was important. I think that for a rural business, you have to also think beyond your local crowd. You have to think,
Mhm.
okay, what type of a business can I create or maintain that is interesting enough to be a destination business? I've got to make
Right.
sure I can bring in people from outside of the immediate area in order for this business to not only survive but thrive. And Brand's Market already had that in place. They already had people coming from all over the state, and frankly, we get calls from all over the country still today of, hey, my daughter's wedding is going to be in Wisconsin this weekend, and we really want to have like this product that we grew up with. Can you ship it up to us to have it there for the
Mm.
wedding? Um, Things like that, I think, are so important to take into consideration. If you're going to have a business in a small town, how are you going to make sure that you bring in enough income for it to support several employees and not just survive but thrive? And you
Yeah.
have to have that destination aspect to your business, and this was already built in at Brand's
Yeah.
Market.
Jake and Sam here.
Thank you for joining us. If you find this content helpful, please like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and especially leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or iTunes. Really helps us out a lot.
Yeah, 1 star. It's on Sam.
Yeah, it's definitely on me.
Yeah, my wife, she's from small town Nebraska, and I mean,
Mhm.
her town she grew up in was a town of 400. Her
Yeah.
parents just moved to another town that's a town of like 300, and you go into that small town. We were there a couple weeks ago, and yes, they have the local food market and everything, but they always have like the ones that you see businesses come and go all the time because they just can't make it. And I think it's
Right.
what you all have brought to Brandt's Market is innovation. They had the established local presence, but you brought the idea of like we can celebrate, rural America, small town Kansas globally by just thinking a little bit bigger. And that's what you have been able to do. And I commend you for that because, that's why, rural America businesses like some people think, well, they're a way of the past, but if you innovate, you can grow a business from anywhere if you know how to do it correctly. And I appreciate that what you guys have done there.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that the key thing about it too is it's a food business, right? And when
Mhm.
you taste something from your childhood, it just brings back that rush of
Yeah.
emotion. And if you can really capitalize on that and make sure that you're providing the same product and that it tastes the same and you're getting it out to people who maybe haven't had it in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, that's a really cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
But it's also part of why this business has survived as
Yeah.
long as it has. Although I will say COVID has presented like a unique challenge because we now have people who come in still today and are like, it just doesn't taste the same. Something's different.
Hmm.
And we've had to train our staff to say, have you had COVID? Because it is made exactly the same way. We
Mhm.
know because we try it day in and day out. We know it tastes the same. It's not us, it's you. And we have to sometimes convince the customer,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
really sorry, but your taste is off.
Right.
Interesting.
Right. No.
Um,
Yeah.
I've heard
it's
that from a lot
that's
of,
been a challenge.
yeah, from
Yeah.
a number of people about how it has impacted taste buds
Yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I
but
mean,
yeah.
you're taking me down memory lane because when I go to the lake, we always have summer sausage with like
Yes.
some cheddar cheese or like pepper jack cheese, and you cut them up and you have it. It's
And you keep it in the cooler on the
oh
boat.
yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love what you've talked about, taking that legacy business, taking that, that part of a community's DNA, and then being able to integrate it with things, new things, adapt, innovate, and be able to, you know, take that foundation, continue to create value, continue to be an important part of the community, but do it in a way that's going to be sustainable for the future. And I think that's, I mean, such a cool thing, and I love getting to see that because, I mean, growing up as a Kansas boy, I love seeing when local communities thrive, and it's hard when businesses can't survive because, I mean, you take a small town and you pull a business out, it might only be three, four, five, jobs, but those are important jobs. That might be a family's entire means of support. And so then, there's another family that's got to go find somewhere else to live. They got to pull out of
Exactly.
town, and that just kind of continues to trickle and happen over time. And so, and these are great places to live. These are great places to grow up. These are great communities to be a part of. And so, when businesses thrive, communities thrive, and being able to adapt to the changing business environment and make these
Yes.
businesses continue to matter for three more generations.
Well, and I
It's
think
just so
one
cool
of
to
the
see.
coolest things about, especially the Lucas location, is we're the only business within the main part of town that
Hmm.
is a place where kids can safely ride their bike, go pick up
Mm,
a soda and get some candy without having to cross a highway. You
hmm.
know, there's a big difference between sending your kid out on their bike to go get a snack if it's just down the block versus wondering if they're trying to cross the 55-mile-an-hour zone out on the highway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, Lucas is 60-mile-an-hour zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the most rewarding things I think locally is that we can still provide that service not only for young kids, but for some of the older folks who have retired and stayed there. It's kind of a meeting place, a gathering place where some of them come down and have a little morning snack and visit. And, we don't sell coffee or anything like that, but they'll come have a soda and a little morning snack and just catch up.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's a really cool thing to be able to
Yeah.
provide.
That's awesome.
One, and like you, I'm in business with my wife, and how do you balance that with being in business with your husband? What's that? I mean, I know you have your work as a legal professional, and I also do work outside of Orange Theory, but how do you balance that with work life, being in business together?
It's tough, right? So I think probably we pick our zones and we pick our lanes and we know what we're each good at and we try to stick to that.
Hmm.
Mm,
So I do everything front of house and he does everything back of house. So I get the final say most of the time on the products that are on the retail shelves in the front. And I get the final say on what the front of store is going to look like and what the marketing looks like, what the photography is. I mean, I handle all of our photography, our website, our social media, our um, bookkeeping, all of those things I either do myself or I oversee someone else handle. Whereas he's completely with, the equipment, the production, the recipe development, making sure that the kitchen staff is keeping everything up to code and all of those things. So for us, that's how it works best. And we definitely talk to each other and we definitely have our moments where we don't agree. But I think that the best way to balance it is when you set aside time for family or when we go out on a date, if the business comes up, we try to stop each other and say, "Hey, let's have personal time. This isn't time to
mm,
talk about business. Let's
Hmm.
let's actually just talk about other things." And it's really important to remember not to let that business engulf every aspect of your life.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very wise advice. Very much so. Um, you bought the business because it had value, right? Not just personal value, but there was value in the business that made it something that, could be transferred from the seller to you and continued.
Yes.
And you've talked about a couple of those things, but would you talk about that in a little bit more detail? Was it just the recipes? Was it just the brand? What were all of those things that gave you the confidence as you're looking at that business that, hey, there's enough value here for us to be able to acquire to make something that matters?
For us at that time, most of the value was in the blue sky for
Hmm.
sure. In
Right.
the brand name, in the following that they had built over time, and
Hmm.
in the recipes. And Doug Brandt was very protective of those recipes. I mean, we got all the way to closing and
Hmm.
we passed a check across the table and he passed back the book of recipes.
Wow.
So,
We're gonna do it at the same time.
That's funny. Yeah.
no, he had the check in hand first.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. I see
So
how it is.
I
Yeah.
would say
That's
that was
great.
the majority of
Yeah.
it because while he himself had updated a few pieces of equipment,
Hmm.
we really bought some very well-loved equipment. It
Yeah.
Mm.
that really didn't have the value. There was a building, there was this
Hmm.
historic building in Lucas. It does not have central heat and air. It's historic. It's a
You are
historic
walking
building.
back in time into a furnace in the summer and a freezer in the winter.
Yes, absolutely. And we've tried to upgrade a
Um,
few of those things as
yeah.
well. But, we still haven't gotten to the point of central heat and air. So we
Yeah.
actually just replaced the walk-in cooler in the Lucas building this past winter, and it was still cork insulated.
Hmm.
And so
Wow.
when my husband started taking it apart, anytime you take apart an old building, you find little bits of history either in the walls or
Yeah.
somewhere. And I think we determined he found some things from the 1930s. It was probably put up in like the 1930s and maybe upgraded a little bit in the 50s, but what we
Oh,
put
that's
in
cool.
was definitely a lot more modern.
Yeah.
But when we bought the store, so over time, each generation had kind of put layers on the retail storefront.
Hmm.
And when we bought it and looked around, it was very, I would say like it was kind of a combination of like 1960s to like early 2000s, right? Like they had the vinyl
Mm.
plank wood flooring on the floor, but then the walls were like kind of a seafoam green, and it just didn't really stand out to us as how we wanted to maintain it.
Hmm.
So we looked at some of the historic photos that the family gave us, and we ended up demoing all the way back to the original beadboard. We went with the original color combo, which was white and kind of a sky blue that we could see in these old photos. We peeled back so many layers. We found original like advertisements still hanging on the wall that they just sided over
Huh.
from the 1930s.
Wow.
The store actually has two murals that were painted on each side. One's a Kansas farm scene, and one is a scene from a postcard from James Brandt's hometown in Czechoslovakia.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
when we took out all the siding, we actually found, so the artist who had done that was an interior designer that was coming through that had helped with the movie theater across the street. And so they paid him to paint these murals at that time, and then the paneling that went up was left over like acoustic paneling that was from the theater. So when we took that off, we actually found the artist had like painted his name really huge right behind the cash register. So we were able to figure out and do some research on who the artist was based upon this massive signature that was actually behind the walls. And then, so there's just always all of these cool things and little bits of history that you
Oh, that's
find. But,
awesome.
but we definitely determined that the walk-in cooler was from probably the 1930s. The showcase in the front was from the 1920s. And we
Mm.
just this summer had to replace the motors that actually cool that. They're kept in the basement and it comes up from underneath.
Oh,
And the
wow.
motors were GM motors from like
Wow.
1952,
Holy
1953
cow.
had run all of this time until
Yeah.
2025. We
That's
finally
amazing.
had to replace
They
American
them.
made.
literally don't make them like that anymore.
No, they don't make them like
Yeah.
that anymore. So, I mean,
Oh,
there are
that's
just
cool.
little things like that that are really amazing and kind of fun
Yeah.
to
Well, I
learn
mean,
I'm about
along
to
the
make a
way.
trip out there.
yeah.
Just like you putting this in my mind, it's
Yeah.
like, man, I just want to go out
Well,
there and just see it.
There is
yeah.
a reason
Same.
it was one of
Same.
the eight wonders of Kansas
Yeah.
commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
That's
having a
cool.
podcast road trip here soon,
Yeah.
folks.
Did they
Yes.
I mean, I'm kind of just more my own thoughts of like so since you've done these, has the Department of Commerce come back out and done like a like unveiling of one of the eight wonders of commerce in Kansas? I mean, have you had any more of that?
So we haven't with the Department of Commerce. We've had some visits from them in Plainville for another business that my husband and I have, but not not directly with the Department of Commerce. Now, the Kansas Sampler Foundation, Marcy Penner's group,
Yeah,
they've
that's what I
been
meant.
back
Yeah,
several
yeah,
times.
yeah.
They actually had Lucas on their big Kansas road trip last year.
Okay.
So they made Brant's one of their stops, which was
Yeah,
awesome
that's
and
cool.
kind of a full circle moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we have Leadership Kansas coming through Plainville this next month, and Brant's Market is on one of their
That's
stops as
awesome,
well.
man.
So,
I was in 2019 that year, and so we got to go
you
through
just
that.
missed us.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I love how you've preserved the history
Hmm.
and in some instances, been able to kind of carve back some of those layers that have built up over time to sort of restore some of the deeper roots of the business, but then also being able to integrate, some of the innovations that are going to make it sustainable for the long run. I mean, that's just so cool. One of the challenges we see sometimes with sellers who have gotten that place where it's like, I don't want to keep, changing my business or updating it or whatever, is that they also have this deep personal integration with the business where it's such an important part of their identity and their own personal legacy. And in some instances, they don't want to see anything change. And when you had that, that transition, how did that work with the seller? Were they very interested in or controlling over, hey, what are you going to do with the business? How is it going to change? What was that kind of conversation and process like?
I would definitely not say they were controlling.
Mhm.
I think that they were mindful
Mhm.
and in making sure that we understood, the recipes especially.
Mhm.
Doug Brandt actually continued to come in for about 2 or 3 months and helped my husband really learn those recipes, which I think is a
Mm.
really big part of why we've been
Yep.
able to keep those the way they always were, is that Doug Brandt was in there for a good 2 or 3 months helping us as part of the transition. And then, as part of the deal, actually, it was in our purchase contract that we would employ his daughter Stephanie for at least 1 year. So
Mm.
she had a 1 year contract as an employee written into our purchase agreement. And I think that was Doug's way of making sure that we learned exactly how they did things. And Stephanie
Mhm.
was always really vocal too, and in a positive way with us about just learn how we do it first
Mhm.
and then decide how you want to do it. And I
Hmm.
think
Mm.
as that fourth generation, she was really supportive of us. There were things she had tried to get her dad to change in the past that he
Mhm.
didn't want to, that she was ready to see change.
Right.
There were other things that she wanted to make sure we understood why they did it the way they did it.
Mhm.
I think kind of in the hopes that we would continue to do it that way. So we had really a nice balance of getting that
Yeah.
fourth generation in there. So Doug was third generation and he came in for a few months, but the fourth generation was there with us for the entire first year. And I
Mm.
think that provided a really nice transition for us in
Right.
between the past and the
Right.
future.
Hmm.
Right. Well, I mean, that's that sounds like you all had a great process.
Yeah.
But especially for folks that are looking at buying a legacy business that's got such deep roots. I mean, there's so much history that's built up in there that makes it what it is and what people recognize and what they gravitate towards. And if you don't have a good plan in place for how you're going to understand that, really
Mhm.
apply that, really carry it forward, really transition that from the seller to the buyer, then you're gonna risk alienating customers, damaging the brand, really destroying the value that's there, or just completely leaving it on the table and not even taking it forward because you don't know
Mhm.
how to do it. And so, for listeners that are thinking about this is a great example of somebody that did it really well. They had a good plan, they had a good seller, they had a good relationship to make sure that all of those intangibles, all of that know-how, all of the stuff between the ears of the seller are going to make it across to where the buyer is actually going to be able to benefit from that. Because you lose that, and then all of a sudden it's not Brandt's Market anymore, right?
Well, and I
It's
think
something different.
even one of the key points was just Stephanie would tell us little tidbits of, okay, this customer
Hmm.
likes this product a certain way, or
Hmm.
this customer wants to see their product wrapped like this. Don't even bother wrapping the product for this customer, and just learning the ins and outs of
Yeah.
exactly what the locals like, on top
Mm.
of how she handled tourist customers coming in for that grassroots art capital
Right.
aspect. So learning all of those things, I think, provided a much smoother transition than if we had
Right.
just dove in on day one and tried to figure it
Right.
out.
Well, and it's a great example of, looking at, hey, where does the value come from? right?
Hmm.
Because in this business, you had brand that was really important. The blue sky, the name recognition. You had recipes.
Hmm.
People have got to understand the product, but then you also have the execution and the delivery. That
Hmm.
know-how of, hey, how do the operations work? How do we interact with customers, but not just any customers, our regulars or these
Right.
things. And if you miss out on those things, and so as a business buyer, if you're looking at it, you really got to take the time to understand, how does this particular business create value? And then
And
how do I understand all that and get it?
what
Hmm.
sets you apart from someone just choosing to go to Walmart where the product is a little less,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So providing that one-on-one butcher counter experience and
Hmm.
learning how to truly do that well
Hmm.
versus allowing the customer to say, hey, you know what? I'm making a trip to Hayes or Salina later. Let's just pick up our steaks there. So
Hmm.
learning that from the family directly was a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Um, got a couple last questions for you as we wrap up the podcast here. This one's really important. Jason, please make a note of this, our producer, so that we can have a special clip on this. Would you please be willing to indulge our foodie fans that might be listening and tell us what are some of your favorite products at brands? What are some of the favorite products that kind of keep people coming back?
Oh, sure.
Especially for listeners and people currently here in the podcast studio that might be thinking about lunch.
Making it work. I'm going to the lake in a month, so I want to make sure I get some with me.
So we
Yeah.
are a full service butcher counter. So if you
Mhm.
come into one of the store locations in Lucas or in Plainville, you can get most any fresh meat product, right? Like we have fresh ground beef, we have steaks, we have
Mhm.
pork chops, we have those things. So just so we're clear, the website sells our most popular products, and the ones that are really the easiest to ship.
Mhm.
So our most popular product, I mean, day in and day out, is the ring bologna. That was a James Brandt original recipe. It's what the store is known for. If you pull up to the Lucas store location, you see hand painted on the window, homemade bologna. I mean,
Mm.
that is just what they were known for. And it's not American bologna. So American bologna is like a completely emulsified sandwich bologna product.
Mhm.
This is a European bologna. So this is something that came from Czechoslovakia. You also see it a lot in like Pennsylvania and some of that area that was
Mhm.
settled by, there was like a heavy Czech or Dutch influence. Like Lebanon bologna is what's known from Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. It's got a sweeter taste to it. We now make that.
Mhm.
We have a sweet bologna that Adam has developed the recipe for based on that. But those products are really our most popular, the ring bologna. And then the second generation of the family, George Brandt, developed a pepper sausage bologna off of that original ring bologna product. Those are very popular. Some of the products that we have developed after the fact have also been really popular. We've developed our own beef sticks recipe. That wasn't something that the store was making. It wasn't an original Czech recipe, but
Mhm.
we knew in Western Kansas that was something people
Yeah.
were always looking for, our beef sticks. We have them in a pretty wide variety of flavors.
And
But
you
my
all just
personal favorite,
won an
yeah,
award for that, didn't
we
you?
did. So the
Yeah.
original beef sticks are, we went to the American Association of Meat Processors National Convention last week in Kansas City, and it was the largest category. This was also the largest competition that they have had since 2012.
Mhm.
So more than a dozen years have gone by since the competition has been this big, and our original beef sticks won reserve grand champion in the
Oh,
meat
that's
snacks
awesome.
category. So
Congratulations.
second place was, we were surprised and we were thrilled. So
Pay attention, folks. World class coming out of Lucas, Kansas.
Yeah.
yes, second place. So we were really excited about that. So that's definitely one of my favorite products. The beef jerky is also really popular. We've developed a recipe for ground jerky, which is also a little bit easier to chew than our original
Mm.
jerky. But both excellent products, both sell really well. We definitely have a lot of requests for those. And then I would say our brats.
Mm.
Our brats, the original brat is based off of a James Brandt recipe. It's really good, but we have, especially in the store, a really wide variety of flavors that we've kind of developed over time that are really good. I would say one of my favorites, we have a dill brat that's really tasty,
Mm.
Mm.
and we have a supreme cheese pizza brat that I just made for
Oh,
dinner two
oh
nights
man.
ago.
I'm so hungry
That's
right now.
really good.
Yeah.
It's
I
got
might
like
be
some
driving up to
tomato and pepper and
Lucas right
cheese.
yeah.
after our
I'm not, yeah. And all this stuff can be shipped
So
too. Like we can
Yeah.
all this stuff can be
Yeah.
shipped to like Wichita if we needed it.
Yeah.
yes, and it's actually surprising. We have a lot of customers that drive up from Wichita
Yeah.
for just
Yeah.
to come to the Lucas store in the summertime,
That's
but we do
awesome.
ship.
Yeah.
We
Would you
ship
put in a
on
plug
ice.
for your website right now?
Yes, absolutely. So if you go to brandsmarket.com,
Hmm.
you can see all sorts of history about the store. And like I said, our most popular products are available if you click the shop link.
Yep.
I will say during the hot summer months, our store manager in Plainville does a really good job of she will actually take the time to look up, okay, where is the destination? What is the temperature here? What are the current temps there? And is it wise to actually ship it this week or should we
Mm,
hold it a week or two? So
right.
we will
Oh,
evaluate
that's
all
great.
of
They
that
do a
in
good
the
job there.
Yeah.
summertime. Just as a heads up, we will contact the buyer though if we are going to hold the product for any reason.
Yeah.
We've just had too much experience with the really hot 100-degree days. Those
Uh-huh.
UPS trucks are not air conditioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but typically in Kansas, any shipment takes about 1 to 2 days. So, it's usually not a problem if we're shipping within Kansas.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We've got two last questions to kind of close out with. First is when you think about folks that might be preparing to sell a business, what's a great tip that you have for them from your experience?
Oh, I think if you're looking to sell a business, I would say don't assume that you don't have a buyer. Just because,
Mm.
especially in rural America, just because you don't have someone in mind locally who you think would be interested, list the business anyway. Go to your CPA who did your tax return last year, ask them to help you put a value on your business, and just get it listed and out there and see what happens. I think if Doug Brandt had done that, he would have had more interest than he realized. It's definitely an ongoing conversation between my husband and I, and every year we have our CPA provide a value on our business where it stands. Just because if someone approached us, everything is always for sale, right? Like this business
Yeah.
is near and dear to
Yeah.
our hearts, but we have grown it to a point where we have to decide, okay, is one of us going to eventually do this full time? Or do we need to find someone else who can really take it to the next level? So that's
Mm.
that's an ongoing conversation we have. The
Hmm.
business is obviously near and dear to us, but we also want to do right by it and the
Hmm.
whole legacy.
Right.
So
Yeah. What a
one
healthy
thing I would
mindset.
say for sellers is every year get that value on your business and really think about if you were going to list it, where would the right place be to list it? So for us, we would make sure that the American Association and the Kansas Association of Meat Processors knew that we were listing it. We would obviously put it out there ourselves on social media and all of those outlets. And even within your local area, you might be surprised who would reach out. That
Hmm.
would be my tip for sellers. If you
Yeah.
know you're going to sell the business, though, and you've already done all of those things, my suggestion would just be to be flexible. I know it's really hard to let go of something that you've been so
Mm.
entrenched in for many, many years, but definitely be prepared to offer a sounding board for your buyer and allow them to ask you questions and be a part of innovating it into something better.
Hmm.
Because I think that's where we really benefited was that Doug would come in and try products. Doug would come in and help us sample the bologna and make sure it was still turning out right, even after we started using a different piece of equipment to make it at the beginning stages.
Hmm.
So I think all of those things were really helpful to us. And that's what I would suggest a seller be prepared to do to really help that buyer be successful.
No, that's great. What's a great tip that you would have for a buyer?
For a buyer, I would say playing off of that last comment, just be really respectful of the seller,
Mm.
right? And be mindful that, especially for us, if this is a family generational business, be
Hmm.
really mindful that this is something that their family developed over a long period of time. Even if someone has only owned or run a business for 25 years, they probably put all of their heart and soul and blood, sweat, and
Hmm.
tears into that business for
Yeah.
10, 15, 20 years. And you have to be mindful and respectful about learning what they want to teach you and taking your time and being respectful in how you innovate and change that.
Mm.
Sure.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for what you're doing to make your community a better place. We really appreciate all of your thoughts today. a lot of our listeners are looking at a deal process, and all of these, all of these thoughts, all of these stories help to prepare folks to have a better outcome. And because we know that when great deals happen, great things happen for families, they happen for communities, they happen for employees,
Yes.
and that makes a huge difference. And we thank you
Yes.
for being
And
part of that with us.
absolutely. And I should add, don't be afraid to reach out to a business where you see someone who is reaching retirement age, or where
Yeah.
you see an opportunity to make something, a destination business, or to grow in another way. So if you are, whether you're in a small town or a big city, if you see a business that you think would be a good opportunity, don't hesitate to reach out, because I can promise you, probably 9 out of 10 business owners would be thrilled to have someone just walk in the door and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in your business."
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. That's a great tip. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today, and to all of our listeners, thank you for checking out this episode. And we wish you all a great deal.
They'll get
Thank
some
you so
sausages.
much.
Yes, do it. We'll post the link. We'll actually give away a couple of boxes after this one. So,
Yes, we can't wait to ship them. So
yep. Awesome.
looking forward to it.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you guys so much.
Thank you for joining us today. For future episodes, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And please check out our website at www.goforemanlaw.com/learning.